Today, the Matt Walsh Show, as the incoming Trump administration prepares to deport millions of criminal aliens, Democratic governors and mayors around the country are plotting ways to sabotage them. Also, Kamala's former campaign staffers are doing the interview circuit and trying to find somebody to blame for her humiliating loss. And of course, they're looking to blame anyone but themselves, specifically. And Sharon Stone goes to Italy to condemn Americans for voting for Donald Trump. The celebrities all promised to leave if he won. Instead, they decided to stay and just whine, I guess. All of that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Finally, some good news. We can all stop holding our breath. Work can actually begin on the major issues facing our country, particularly our massive national debt. Let me be clear, our nation is completely broke. We're sitting on top of a house of cards that's looking shakier by the day. As long as our economy remains perched on this precarious foundation, there's really only one strategy that makes sense: diversify your savings. Look, there are so many things that are completely out of our control, even out of our president's control, which is exactly why you need a safe haven for your savings. That's where Birch Gold Group comes in. They'll help you convert your IRA or 401k into an IRA backed by physical gold. Here's the best part. It won't cost you a single penny out of pocket to make the switch. Remember, it only takes one card being pulled for the whole thing to come crashing down. Don't wait till it's too late to protect your savings with gold. Text Walsh to 989898 right now. Get your free information kit. Plus, if you act before Black Friday, you'll receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchase. As Daily Wire's exclusive gold partner for the past 8 years, I trust Birch Gold with my own savings, and you can too. That's Walsh to 989898. Text now. We've heard a lot from Tom Homan lately, and for good reason. He's the incoming border czar for the second Trump administration, and he's vowed unapologetically to deport as many illegal aliens as possible and to arrest any local officials who try to intervene. We talked about that promise yesterday in the context of the mayor of Denver, who's suggesting that he's going to defy federal immigration authorities who try to carry out deportations in the second Trump term. Homan's response was the correct one, which is that if the mayor of Denver wants to go to jail, then ICE will happily oblige. And this kind of showdown between Tom Homan and local officials has been brewing for a very long time. During the first Trump administration, when Homan served briefly as the acting director of ICE, several local governments announced that they would undermine the work of federal immigration officials. And maybe no single local official was more brazen about her efforts than Libby Schaaf, who at the time was the mayor of Oakland, California. This is an incident that's mostly been forgotten, but it's one of the most extraordinary moments in modern American politics. And it's crucial to understanding Tom Homan's origin story as a hardliner in dealing with states that interfere with federal immigration enforcement. It also provides insight into how he's likely to direct immigration enforcement in Trump's second term. So here's how the showdown began. As mayor of Oakland, Schaaf somehow got wind of an upcoming ICE raid in the Bay Area. And then she did everything in her power to sabotage the raid in order to protect as many of the illegal aliens as she could. First, she went on social media to announce that the raid was coming. And then she held a press conference to explain that it was her duty to compromise an ongoing federal law enforcement operation. Watch.
Yesterday, I learned information from multiple sources that there is potentially an ICE activity planned in the Bay Area that could be starting as soon as today. My priority is to keep this community safe. It is not my wish to panic people, but to ensure that they're prepared with information, that they know their rights as well as their responsibilities, and know about the resources that this community offers. Due to the reliability of my sources and the fact that I received this from multiple sources, I felt that it was my duty to share the information.
What Libby Schaaf was basically doing there was serving as a gang lookout. She heard that the police were coming, so she told everybody to hide with the clear and explicit goal of obstructing law enforcement, and it worked. Following Schaaf's early warning, more than 800 illegal aliens with criminal records managed to evade ICE's crackdown in the Bay Area. And as Tom Homan put it at the time, quote, "The Oakland mayor's decision to publicize her suspicions about ICE's operation further increased that risk for my officers and alerted criminal aliens, making it clear that this reckless decision was based on her political agenda." Now, to be clear, every single person that ICE was looking for was guilty of multiple crimes. They were people who had no right to be in this country to begin with, for one thing. And they also committed additional crimes when they were here. Among the 150 aliens that were arrested by ICE during the crackdown, for example, was a gang member who had 4 prior deportations, along with convictions for sex with a minor, DUI, and assault. He apparently wasn't paying attention to the news that day, so Tom Homan's agents were able to find him, fortunately. After the raid, Donald Trump told reporters that he would direct the DOJ to investigate Libby Schaaf for obstructing federal agents. And he told his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to look into it. Watch.
They were all set. This was long in the planning. And she said, get out of here. And she's telling that to criminals. And it's certainly something that we're looking at with respect to her individually. What she did is incredible and very dangerous from the standpoint of ICE and Border Patrol. Very dangerous. She really made law enforcement much more dangerous than it had to be. To me, that's obstruction of justice. And perhaps the Department of Justice can look into that with respect to the mayor, because it's a big deal out there. And a lot of people are very angry about what happened.
Now, as we all know, in the end, nothing came out of this. Jeff Sessions and everybody else in the room nodded along as Trump made this suggestion. Then they promptly forgot all about it. Instead of prosecuting Schaaf for interfering with the enforcement of federal law, the DOJ got to work investigating Trump for things he didn't even do. They were more interested in fake allegations of collusion with Russia than investigating actual videotaped evidence that the mayor of Oakland was colluding with felons to obstruct federal investigations, which you would think would be a pretty serious crime. Now, at the time, the idea of hauling an elected official to a courtroom seemed like a red line to a lot of conservatives, even when an elected official was clearly and deliberately violating the law, as was the case with Libby Schaaf. Very few people in power, among conservatives, had the political will to punish her for it. They didn't want to go on camera and call for her arrest. After all, Republicans thought, well, if we start arresting our political opponents, even ones who have actually committed serious crimes, then the Democrats might try to arrest us. Of course, as it turns out, Democrats didn't need permission from Republicans. They were going to escalate to this level to this level regardless. So Republicans played it safe for fear of the Democrat escalation, but Democrats escalated anyway. It's a tale as old as time. But Tom Homan was the notable exception back then. All the way back in early 2018, even before the mayor of Oakland publicly undermined ICE, Homan said that the leader of every sanctuary city in the country should go to jail. But Homan was apparently outvoted, so that never happened. And Schaaf was never investigated, much less prosecuted. Of course, over the past few years, a lot has changed. Democrats have decided that there's no problem with prosecuting their political opponents for crimes that are completely fake. They've dispensed with every norm and every principle of jurisprudence, quote unquote, that counsels against these kinds of prosecutions. So now, 6 years later, there's reason to believe that Homan will have the opportunity to actually follow through on his plan to arrest officials who stand in his way. Homan certainly seems to think that's a distinct possibility based on his comments responding to the mayor of Denver this week. And I played part of this clip yesterday, but here it is again in case you missed it. Watch.
Tom, you heard this mayor out there in Colorado. I want to get your reaction to it, and I want you to be clear about who has jurisdiction, the federal government or state and local governments. And if you're a sanctuary state or city, are you breaking the law?
You're absolutely breaking the law. All you have to do is look at Arizona versus U.S. You'll see these breaking the law. But look, me and the Denver mayor, we agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to put him in jail. Because there's a statute, it's Title 8 United States Code 1324 III, and what it says is, it's a felony if you knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from immigration authorities. It's also a felony to impede a federal law enforcement officer. So if we don't want to help, that's fine. He can get the hell out of the way. But we're going to go do the job.
That was Homan's response to the mayor of Denver, Mike Johnson, who was threatening that there would be a Tiananmen Square moment if ICE tried to enforce immigration law in Denver. Johnston implied that Denver police and tens of thousands of Denver residents would obstruct ICE in the same way that, the guy stood up to the line of Chinese tanks in that famous photo. So the analogy is equating the enforcement of existing immigration laws that any country needs in order to be defined as a country, with a communist regime's violent crackdown on a pro-democracy protest. He's saying Denver residents are justified in seeing a parallel between these two events. And he's encouraging them, along with law enforcement, to stand in the way of federal agents enforcing federal law. So fundamentally, what's happening here is that the mayor of Denver is assuming that the second Trump administration will function a lot like the first one did. He's betting that Republicans will back off rather than upset the activists and the mothers who are waving the roses and so on. So that's the same approach that the local media and Democrat activists are taking in California, where a similar effort to resist the next Trump administration is underway. As Fox News reported, a city council in Northern California has just voted to resist federal immigration officials in Trump's second term. Quote, the Redwood City Council in California voted 4-3 in favor of calling for staff to draft an ordinance for consideration that would restrict the city from cooperating with immigration authorities. During discussion of his proposal on Monday, Councilmember Chris Sturkin argued in favor of passing an ordinance to ensure that no city resources may be utilized to cooperate with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement unless required under law. Here's how the local CBS affiliate is selling this proposal.
Tonight, the Redwood City Council will discuss whether to take the first steps on an ordinance that would restrict the use of city resources to help immigration authorities. President-elect Trump's incoming border czar has promised to slash funding to states that don't assist with mass deportations. And as Jose Martinez reports, those promises have prompted uncertainty and spurred action from Bay Area communities and organizations.
On a sunny afternoon in East San Jose, Evelyn Castañeda walks with her daughter, Catherine. The sound of laughter fills the air, but behind Evelyn's smile, there's an undeniable tension.
En la cosa de migración, pues serían las redadas. Uno andaría con miedo de que pueda haber unas redadas.
Evelyn's journey as an undocumented immigrant began 15 years ago when she fled violence and poverty in Honduras. The country has long struggled with gang violence, political instability, and economic hardship.
Now, you might have noticed that every time they try to make these emotional appeals where they try to humanize, quote unquote, people who are in this country illegally, they end up sabotaging their own argument. In this case, we apparently have a woman who came to this country illegally more than a decade ago. In that period, she's never bothered to learn conversational English. She's never obtained any kind of legal authorization to be here. But we're supposed to feel sorry for her and allow her to stay in this country because even though she broke the law and seems to be doing nothing at all to fit into the country and assimilate, she seems like a nice person, and that should be enough. That's the argument they're going with in the state of California. And they're not alone. Activists in Arizona are doing the same thing. They're gearing up for the second Trump administration by working on their storytelling skills. Watch.
Arizona groups are promising to stand up for the undocumented community as plans for deportation begin to ramp up.
We're working on training up our legal community so that we are all ready.
Advocates who gathered on Zoom today say they worry the new Trump administration will try to work quickly.
We need to continue to work on documentation and storytelling because on both sides of the border, the narrative will be that these are criminals who are being deported when these are moms and dads, just like me.
Joanna Williams is the executive director of Kino Border Initiative in Nogales. The organization helps deported migrants, including asylum seekers. Williams described one of the women she's been helping.
She's been in Nogales for 6 months, waiting for an appointment to seek asylum on the CBP One app. If she doesn't get that in the next 2 months, there isn't going to be a pathway to asylum for her.
So the narrative is that illegal aliens are criminals, according to the activist. And, well, that narrative is true because these aliens are in this country illegally. But did you know that some criminals are moms and dads, too? Did you realize that? You can't possibly throw moms and dads in jail. You can't possibly make them face consequences for their actions. That would be unthinkable, even though it happens every day in every state, in every country, in the entire world. Then she goes on to say that one of her clients has been in Arizona for 6 months without filing an asylum claim. And that's part of the problem. Nobody should be in this country while their asylum claim is being processed because the overwhelming majority of asylum claims are fraudulent. These claims are often crafted with the help of NGOs and law firms who include fake stories of political persecution to cover up the fact that these aliens are here seeking economic benefits, which is not asylum. But once you let people into this country to file these bogus claims, as we've learned, it's very hard to get rid of them. They just stay here. It's pretty uncommon that their asylum claim is rejected and they say, okay, well, I'll go home then. That doesn't happen. So again, this is yet another argument from the activists that ends up being self-defeating. They're making our point for us. These are people who have not adapted their strategy in any meaningful way in the past 4 years. Rather than offering solutions, they're trying and failing to appeal to our emotions. And of course, they're also committing to engaging in even more lawfare, and that's not going to change either. Over in Illinois, for example, they're vowing to take the Trump administration to court over his proposal to use military assets to carry out these deportations. Watch.
True, Trump says in response to a post claiming he'll declare a national emergency and use military assets to deport undocumented immigrants. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says that's a chilling prospect.
The idea of calling out, the Army into the domestic confines of the United States seems uncalled for and may in fact be unconstitutional and illegal.
Now, Trump's proposal to use the military is a concerning sign for Democrats, though not for the reasons they're claiming. In reality, they're upset because it's a clear signal that in his second term, Trump is going to use every available means at his disposal to get illegal aliens out of the country. And in terms of tactics, this is an escalation from what we saw in Trump's first term, and so predictably, Democrats are claiming it's somehow illegal. What's missing from their analysis, though, is that Trump never said he'd order troops to remove illegal aliens themselves. He said that military assets could be used, which is in keeping with how every president since Bill Clinton has sent the National Guard and active duty members of the military to the border to perform various support roles. And those roles have included monitoring the border fixing equipment, and that sort of thing. Trump's incoming Homeland Security advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, has previously said that in Trump's second term, the military could build temporary facilities to house illegal aliens prior to their deportation. That's another option that would probably have no problem in the courts. As Ryan Burke, a professor at the U.S. Air Force Academy, recently put it, quote, "I think that Trump's plan probably won't face a whole lot of successful challenges. There's too much ambiguity in these laws to point to something that says, hey, you absolutely cannot do this." For their part, over in New Mexico, state officials are walking the line between deportations are inhumane and the border needs to be secure somehow. So here's the state's governor explaining that while more border security is good, it's wrong to separate families and use the military in any way to accomplish that goal. Watch.
You can't use the military. You can't do mass deportation. So any federal administration, you should expect states, and I think you should expect some bipartisan support, not just by the Democratic governors, is that violating the Constitution and the law, we're not going to do that. We ought to be working on making sure that violent criminals and criminal activity is stopped everywhere. There isn't a state that isn't interested, whether you're an American citizen or not. And he effectively, Trump, killed the bipartisan border deal. Not the first time that he's done that. We need more agents. We need more collective effort so that we're bringing border security and holding people accountable where they are. Disrupting family status and the economy, inhumane, cruel, unfair, discriminate policies that, again, are illegal on their face. We are not going to cooperate in any way in that effort.
So she says it's illegal to do mass deportations. What? So she's not claiming that obviously deportation is not illegal. She's saying a mass deportation. So you're not allowed to deport a bunch of illegals at once. You have to do it one at a time? Is that the rule that she's just invented? Where is that in the Constitution? If you have illegal aliens in the country, you can deport them, but you have to do one at a time. One every hour is what you can't do more than what is. So maybe that's it. Is that what it is? This is the middle ground that some Democrats have apparently decided on ahead of Trump's second term. They recognize that Americans overwhelmingly want border security. They want to see immigration law being enforced. And after the last election, there's no denying that. But then Democrats claim that any immigration enforcement needs to respect the sanctity of the families of illegal aliens. And then they threaten to use the legal system to shut down any practical solutions. And they're going with this approach that makes no sense because for the most part, it worked during Trump's first term. Politicians like the mayor of Oakland didn't face any consequences for undermining federal immigration policy, complaining about family separations, as if family separations don't happen every day in our judicial system, was effective At the time, Democrats could claim to care about immigration enforcement while preventing immigration law from actually being enforced. Now, from the response of those various sanctuary cities and states to the incoming Trump administration, it's very apparent that Democrats' tactics probably won't be any different this time around. They think they can derail Trump's deportation agenda with the same lazy appeals to emotion, backed up by lawfare, and that's what they're hoping for. It's an act we've all seen before. It's an act that Tom Homan in particular is very familiar with. He's been very consistent over the past 8 years about how exactly he'd deal with this particular strategy. He plans to deport anyone who's illegally in this country, whether they're part of a family unit or not. He doesn't seem particularly keen on allowing anyone to stand in his way either. And if there's a reason for Democrats to drop the emotional blackmail and let Tom Homan do his job, it's that no one has any incentive anymore to hold him back. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Let's talk about something that keeps businesses up at night, managing finances. If your current system feels about as useful as a chocolate teapot, I've got a solution that'll make you wonder how you ever lived without it. It's called Ramp. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and put money in your pocket. Picture this. You give every employee a card, but you're in complete control. You can even set tight limits. Plus, you can say goodbye to wasting your life deciphering expense reports at month's end. Ramp categorizes your expenses in real time and collects receipts automatically. You'll be closing your books 8 times faster. But Ramp isn't just about saving time, it's about cold, hard cash. The average business saves 5% in their first year with Ramp. Not to mention, Ramp is so easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. And now get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Walsh, ramp.com/Walsh. That's ramp.com/Walsh. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. Well, the Harris campaign, the former Harris campaign, may it rest in peace, is now entering the phase of mourning a political loss where they're going around and doing the podcast circuit and trying to figure out who to blame for their loss. Who to blame but themselves, obviously, and their candidate, because you can't blame them. So who aside from the people that should be blamed, should we blame? So I'm going to share a couple of clips from a podcast interview. I'm not sure what podcast this is. It's one of them. It's one of the podcasts. They did one of the 800 million podcasts that are out there. This is an interview with Stephanie Cutter, who's a campaign official for the Kamala campaign, or was. And a couple of clips here. We'll start with this. Here she is basically blaming the media for the loss, which is pretty great. You love to see it. Let's watch this.
I would say, I mean, look, I am not media hater by any measure, and I think that, we women don't get far in life talking about double standards, so that's not the point. But I do think a narrative, 107 days, 2 weeks up because of a hurricane, 2 weeks talking about how she didn't do interviews, which, she was doing plenty, but we were doing in our own way. We had to, be the nominee, had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in. But real people heard in some way that we were not going to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump that I think that was a problem. And then on top of that, we would do an interview, and to Stephanie's point, the questions were small and processy and about
dumb.
They were not informing a voter who was trying to listen to learn more or to understand. And I'm not here to say that the whole system was focused on us incorrectly. I'm just saying, again, of the things we need to explore as we move forward as a campaign and as a country, that does a disservice to voters. And, I think back and think we should have signaled more of our strategy early on about podcasts and who we were trying to reach. But we had a limited amount of time to reach the people we were trying to reach, and we were trying to go to them. But being up against a narrative that we weren't doing anything or we were afraid to have interviews is completely and also took hold a little bit. And we just gave us another thing we had to fight back for that Trump never had to worry about.
So where do we begin? Let's start at the beginning of the clip where she laments that they only had 107 days. 170 days. Yeah. Well, why is that? It's because Kamala chose to shiv Biden in the neck and steal his nomination from him. Like that's what happens when you do that. You didn't have a lot of time. She could have had more time if she was actually nominated and voted into that position. She was voted into the position of being the nominee. Then you have more time. But she wanted to steal the thing out from underneath Biden, which means that you have less time. And if you weren't prepared to actually run a campaign, well, then maybe you shouldn't have stolen it. But what about that? And then she complains that they were expected to do interviews, even though Trump was not expected to do interviews, which is just asinine. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Trump was doing marathon interviews, like with all kinds of people. He was doing hostile interviews. He was doing friendly interviews. He was doing, he was doing live interviews in front of audiences. There was the National Black Journalists Association, whatever the hell it was. He was doing stuff like that. He was holding press conferences. Of all the things you could hit Trump for, being afraid of interviews is just not one of them. That's the last thing on the list of things that you could possibly criticize him for. And then to make matters even more pathetic, she whines about the questions that she got during the interviews because the questions were not informing the voters, she says. Well, wait a second. The question isn't supposed to inform the voter. The answer is. Okay, if Kamala didn't like the questions, her job is to pivot them in a direction she does like. That's your job. That's what campaigning is. It's your job as the campaign to stay on message, to know what your message is and pivot back to it. It's not the job of an interviewer to keep you on message. And as it happens, most of her interviewers were trying to do that for her. They're actually trying to help. And that's why she says the questions were small and processy, whatever the hell that means. Well, why is that? It's because Kamala couldn't answer big questions without rambling like a dumbass. So the media did you a favor by asking small questions. They were trying to help you. The alternative would have been big questions, relevant questions that she would fumble in humiliating fashion. And then finally, she says that the interview about the narrative about Kamala not doing interviews was just another thing they had to overcome and deal with that Trump didn't have to deal with. Well, again, Trump didn't have to deal with the narrative that he didn't do interviews for the reason that he was doing interviews. He was doing like 18 hours of interviews every day, it felt like. Also, you want to talk about who was dealing with stuff that the other one didn't have to? How about getting shot in the head? How about that? That's a pretty big thing that Trump had to deal with that Kamala didn't. How about multiple criminal trials? How about almost getting shot a second time? And yet she's whining about he didn't have to deal with this kind of thing. What kind of thing? The worst thing Kamala had to deal with is people saying you're not doing interviews because she wasn't. And she could just do the interviews and that's how you get rid of it. That's the worst thing. That's the worst challenge she had to overcome was that. Meanwhile, Trump's out there getting shot at and having people trying to throw him in prison. And yet you got the Kamala campaign whining about the hardships they faced. It's no surprise this campaign was a disaster. If this is the people if these are the people who were running it, it's no surprise. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part of the interview was when they were asked about Joe Rogan. Why didn't you do? It's been a lot of speculation. Why didn't you do Joe Rogan? And here's the answer they gave.
Stephanie, one of the I'm believed to be the more tedious post-election debates is about should Kamala Harris have gone on Rogan? Can you just, not to be tedious about it, but could you talk a little bit about how close she came to doing it, why it didn't happen?
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue around this, a lot of theories. It's pretty simple. We wanted to do it. I hate to repeat this over and over, but it was a very short race with a limited number of days. And for a candidate to leave the battleground to go to Houston, which is a day off the playing field in the battleground, getting that timing right is really important. So we had discussions with Joe Rogan's team. They were great. They wanted us to come on. We wanted to come on. We tried to get a date to make it work, and ultimately we just weren't able to find a date. We did go to Houston, and she gave a great speech at an amazing event.
The Beyonce event?
Yes. Well, I'm going to call it reproductive freedom. And because Texas is ground zero for the impact of these Trump abortion bans. There's a story out today, in fact, of another young woman who lost her life because of it. And we were hoping to be able to fit it in around that. And ultimately weren't able to do it. As it turns out, that was the day that Trump was taping his Joe Rogan. Which they had never confirmed to us. We kind of figured that out in the lead up to it. She was ready, willing to go on Joe Rogan. Would it have changed anything? It would have been it would have broken through, not because of the conversation with Joe Rogan, but because the fact that she was doing it. And that was really the benefit of it. Will she do it sometime in the future? Maybe. Who knows? But it, didn't ultimately impact the outcome one way or the other. But she was willing to do whatever it takes.
So there really isn't any good excuse for not doing Rogan. But of all the bad excuses, I think they chose the worst one. In that what even is the excuse? It's first of all that they didn't want to take Kamala off the campaign trail for a day. Well, fortunately, these things called planes exist. And so you could fly down to Austin in a couple of hours. And the interview is not actually 19 hours long. It's like 2 hours, if you even do a full-length interview with Rogan. And then you leave. He doesn't make you stay the night. You don't have to, so you dedicate all of about 5 hours to this, all told, at most, and including travel. You still have 10 hours of campaigning you could do. And I'm leaving you 9 hours of sleep and relaxation. And that's a pretty relaxed, sort of low-key schedule to be on a campaign. So there, I just fixed the schedule for you. That's how you figure it out. A little late, unfortunately, for you, but you could have done it. You could have done it. And the fact is, there is no good excuse, because if you're being granted access, if you're running a campaign and you're being granted access to a platform like that, especially if it's a platform, not only a massive platform, but a massive platform that gives you access to an audience that you don't normally have access to, and to voters who you need, then you drop everything and you do the interview. I mean, it's as simple as that. This is no different from when I was promoting our film, Am I Racist? I knew that, we of course wanted to go on Rogan Show to talk about the movie. We would go down and do Rogan Show whenever, anytime. Look, just tell us the time. You could tell us, well, you're only available at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. I'll be there. It doesn't matter. Just give me the time. I'll be there, because I recognize that we have this thing we want to tell people about. He's got this huge platform. It's huge. The largest and most powerful platform in all of media is what he has. So you tell me, and I will be. You set the guardrails here. You tell me what we need to do, and we'll be there. And if you're running a presidential campaign, well, you also have something to promote, which is your candidacy for president. And you should have the same attitude. There's no rally you could do that would be more powerful for your campaign than a Joe Rogan interview. So that's what you would do. Unless, of course, the real reason you didn't do the interview is that you didn't think she could handle it. You didn't think she could handle it intellectually. Okay, so if that's the reason, then it makes sense. And we all know that is the reason. It's got nothing to do with scheduling. Oh, we couldn't make it work. The most important opportunity that we've been given the entire campaign. You're sitting there complaining, oh, we only had 107 days. Well, So you don't have a lot of time. It would seem that you want to reach as many people as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. Well, a Joe Rogan interview, that's a great way to do that. So you're going to turn it down. Oh, no, sorry. We got to do a rally in Ohio today. So unfortunately, so we can't make it. You know, we could talk to 300 people at this rally, or we could talk to 30 million, you know. Doesn't make any sense from a scheduling. As a scheduling excuse, it makes no sense. But if your real reason is, yeah, well, she's just dumb and we don't think she can handle this. She cannot handle a 2-hour conversation with a real human being that isn't scripted and who's going to ask her real questions. She can't handle it. But they're not going to say that. They all know that, but they're not going to say it. Which, unfortunately for them, not that I feel sorry for them, but you've got whoever that was, Stephanie Cutter. She basically, as someone who's, you know, a campaign official, she has to basically fall on the sword here. Because she's got to give this ridiculous answer. It makes her, if you take her answer at face value, her and whoever else was speaking there, it makes them look totally incompetent. So that if you're a politician and you're launching your own campaign for Senate or whatever, president 2028, you're not going to hire these people because you listen to that answer, you go, wait a second, you didn't understand the power of this kind of opportunity, and so you couldn't fit it in your schedule? It makes you sound totally incompetent because you don't want to give the real reason, which is like, look, we were saddled with an awful candidate who's very stupid and cannot speak. And so that's the reason we lost. That's the issue. That's why we couldn't do the interviews. That's why we couldn't do Rogan. We always had to, we were trying to, hey, listen, guys, we were trying to figure out a way to get this woman into the White House, even though she's awful and terrible, everybody hates her, and she's very dumb. I mean, you should give us credit that she got any votes at all. I mean, we're geniuses that she only lost by the amount that she lost all the swing states. But, you know, the fact that she won any states at all is miraculous. I don't know. If I was them, that's what I would be saying, because it's actually kind of true. Not that they are, great at their jobs, but they could be spinning it that way, but they feel like they can't because they don't want to upset Kamala. And especially because Kamala is a quote unquote woman of color. And so they don't want to be accused of being sexist and racist themselves. And so now they got to kind of fall on the sword and present themselves as totally incompetent, implicitly taking the blame for a loss that really does just come down to the fact that Kamala Harris was an awful, really, really terrible candidate. I mean, easily the weakest major party presidential candidate in American history. Easy. There's not even any competition for that title. All right. Here's a headline from the Daily Mail. Backlash against Miss Universe as viral video shows her using N-word. So this is the next big controversy. The woman who was just crowned Miss Universe was using, quote unquote, the N-word, the mystical word, the magical incantation, the combination of two syllables that cannot be uttered under any circumstance in any context unless you have darker skin, in which case you can use it 50 times per sentence and it's okay. So she used that word, supposedly. That's the headline. And before we get into the article, it did feel kind of inevitable that there would be some kind of backlash, some kind of controversy surrounding this woman, because she is, after all, an actual woman, a blonde-haired, a white blonde woman just won a beauty pageant. And that's pretty controversial these days because she wasn't trans, not morbidly obese, not a quote-unquote diverse person, just a blonde woman. The kind of women who were like winning all the beauty pageants for forever until recently. She won one of them. And that's a big problem. That's not okay. So you kind of knew that they had to find some reason to go after this person. And they found it. Let's read the article. Newly crowned Miss Universe Victoria Thielvig is facing intense criticism after a TikTok video showed her using a racial slur Thielvig, representing Denmark, won the 73rd Miss Universe title on November 16th in Mexico City, where she competed against 120 other beauty pageant hopefuls. Her selection as a winner was seen as a victory for the anti-woke, after the 2023 competition featured married, plus-sized, and transgender contestants. Why is married getting thrown in there? You know, that woke 2023 competition that had plus-sized, trans, and married contestants? Married's not a problem, let's be clear. That's great. The other two, though, for a beauty pageant, that's where you run into the issues. Anyway, in the video posted from the Empire... Well, you know what? I'm not even going to read this. Let's just play the video, okay? And then it has some of the comments from people. Okay, so here's some of the comments. I won't describe the video because we'll just play it. But skipping ahead, one disgusted user said, "Runner-up, you're up. This one is done." Talking about the beauty pageant, saying she's done because of this shocking video where she uses the N-word, supposedly. Another commenter said, "In that crown at that, OMG." Someone else says on TikTok, "I feel like she needs to be decrowned. An apology is not enough." And so on and so on. So people are very upset at this video where she quote unquote uses the N-word, saying she needs to have the crown taken away, she needs to be fired. Let's just go ahead and play the clip of this horrifying, controversial incident. Here it is.
High five. I be spiked out. I could trip a referee. Tell by my attitude that I most definitely from.
Okay, so that's it. And if you're listening to the audio podcast and you're confused, she's standing, she's in New York, looking out over the skyline, and she's lip-syncing the words to that Jay-Z song. And it's bleeped out, but he says the N-word in the song, as rappers are known to do. She's lip-syncing. She's not even singing. You can't hear. That was what you just heard there. That's not her. That's not Miss Universe, Miss Thielvig from Denmark. That was Jay-Z that you heard there. And then Alicia Keys, I think. That's not her. So she's lip-syncing along to the song. And the song features the N-word. And so that is, when you see the headline that she used the N-word, that's what they mean. Doesn't even say the word. Doesn't audibly say it. She mouths it. She lip-syncs it. Maybe. It's not even clear if she did that. I don't even know if she lip-synced. She might have actually skipped. Even in the lip sync, it looked to me like even when she was lip syncing, she didn't move her mouth for that part. But let's just assume she did. She lip synced the word while lip syncing a Jay-Z song, and this becomes a source of outrage. There are multiple headlines in major news publications because a beauty pageant winner was lip syncing to a Jay-Z song on TikTok. That's where we are. So is this the rule now? You can't say the word if you're white. You also can't even vaguely move your mouth in the shape of saying the word, even if you're not actually saying it. I mean, at this point, maybe we should say, like, are white people even allowed to hear the word? Maybe it's offensive for a white person to be in the vicinity where someone is saying it just from hearing it. If someone else says it and a white person is there, the white person should be condemned as though they said it because they were there and they were in some way experiencing the word, and that's too far. You can't say it, you can't lip sync it, you can't hear it, you can't think it, you can't talk about it. Not this word. The word of all words, this ineffable, magical, mystical, otherworldly, supernatural word. Now, this is obviously ridiculous. I don't have to explain why. I have plenty of times in the past. The idea that a white person can't even lip sync a popular song, the idea that a white person isn't supposed to even, sing along audibly to a song that was, or inaudibly to a song that was all over the radio for years, all of that is ridiculous. The idea that any word at all is offensive regardless of context is also ridiculous. Every single word that's ever been invented in this language or any other can only be judged in the context in which it's used. To say that a word cannot be used in any context, even simply in the context of referring to it and talking about it, is to give that word actual magical powers. It is to say that the combination of letters and syllables themselves somehow have some kind of power. There's something inherently evil about the sounds themselves. And like we're living in some sort of horror movie where, you know, the kid finds the book of spells in the attic and dusts it off and says some word, and next thing you know, it awakens an evil ancient ghost from 10,000 years ago. That's how this word is treated. And unless you're black, in which case you just say the word all you want. It has no power at all. So all of that is ridiculous. I think most of us understand that. I do want to make another point, which is that this hyper-focus on this word, turning it into the taboo of all taboos, giving it more power than any word has ever had in any language ever. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, because I can't think of any other word. I can't think of a precedent for this, where there's any word that cannot be spoken in any context, written, you know, mouthed, lip sync. Like I don't know there's ever been a word like that. So when you do that, there's eventually you get a very predictable backlash, and suddenly people start using the word way more often than they would have otherwise, because you turned it into this uber taboo. That's the way this always goes. I mean, look at what happened. Look at what's happened with the words gay and retarded, okay? Now, when I was a kid, those were two of the most common words in our lexicon, I'll admit. I mean, they were almost like verbal crutches. If you grew up in the like late 90s and early 2000s era, it was just, they were used all the time. It was, and they weren't slurs. Like gay didn't necessarily refer to anything related to homosexuality. Retarded didn't necessarily refer to somebody who was actually mentally disabled. They took on much broader meanings, like very, to the point of like not meaning anything anymore. But then the PC censors and the woke scolds got to work, and they gave these words almost as much power as the N-word, like almost. For a long time, you know, you started hearing about the R word, like you can't even say the word when referring to it. And that seemed to work for a time. Like it seemed like for about 15 to 20 years, from right around when I graduated high school to a couple of years ago, these words were almost entirely eradicated. Like nobody was using them. But then the backlash came, because the scolds and the censors, like they didn't let up. They kept putting such emphasis on the word, and the backlash comes, and now you have this new generation of kids who became enthralled with those words yet again, precisely because they were told they can't say them. You know, you get this new generation of kids, they're like, oh, what do you mean? What's the big deal with these words? Why can't we say these words? They're just words. And when you say that to kids, especially to like boys, they go, okay, well, these are words we need to say a lot. I mean, these are awesome words, apparently. Like, show me the words that I absolutely cannot say under any circumstance, and those are the words that I want to say. Now it's like hilarious to say those words. That's the way it works. And suddenly now we're right back where we were in 1997 or something. And kids are using those two words, gay and retarded, constantly. And it seems that something similar is probably happening with the N-word, just from what I could see in kind of internet culture. That word seems to be gaining popularity in the same way that the other two are. You know, I imagine that if you went to a public middle school or high school, I don't know, I haven't been to one since I graduated, but you'd probably find that the same thing is starting to happen there. If it's not happening yet, it will, because this is natural. This is what happens. When you scream in people's faces and you say, don't say this, not this. You must never say this. You must never, ever say this. You cannot say this. This word, not this word. Of all, you can't. You can't even whisper it. Don't even, when you hear it, run from the room screaming. When you do that, all you do is you make the words enticing, especially, again, to younger people, especially to young men in particular. You've just made it very easy to like turn something funny, because all you have to do is just use that word, and now it's automatically funny because it's so taboo. And so this is all very predictable. All right, finally, before we get to daily cancellation, we can't get into the Thanksgiving holiday without me mentioning this. And just a story I wanted to share with you for no particular reason. There's no reason I'm talking about this, so don't read too much into it. I just thought it was interesting, just an interesting tidbit. I saw it and I said, I'll probably pass that along. We'll go ahead and pass that along to the old audience. So this is from the New York Post. The bird flu virus was detected in retail samples of raw milk from a California-based dairy farm as cases continue to rise across the state, according to health officials. The contaminated sample came from the Fresno-based Raw Farm, the largest producer and retailer of raw dairy in California. The tainted sample was detected by officials from the Santa Clara County Public Health Office, which has been testing raw milk already placed in retail stores across the state as a second line of consumer protection. Apparently, so they found bird flu in this raw milk. They also have this farm, according to this, has also been traced back. There's been outbreaks of other things. I'm trying to find that in here. E. coli. So there was a recall on raw cheddar cheese because of E. coli. So anyway, bird flu in the raw milk. That's fascinating. That's interesting. Who could have ever predicted that? I mean, that's, I wasn't there someone, I'm trying to remember, wasn't there someone, who was it, who recently made a point about how raw milk is unsanitary, and then they got dogpiled by like 50 million angry raw milk hippies on the internet? Didn't that happen? Who was that? What was that guy's name? I can't remember. I don't know who that guy was. I vaguely remember somebody saying raw milk is gross and you should probably sanitize it. Like there's no reason why you can't. All you're doing is it's no different than boiling water you take out of a stream. There's no reason to make this into an ideological thing, like it's evil somehow. Is it evil to sanitize your water? Wasn't there someone saying that? I don't know. He's like this guy who's constantly vindicated all the time, especially with his takes that the internet judges to be the most outrageous. And he's like just always right about that stuff, it turns out. I don't know. I can't remember who that guy was. He had a great beard. I remember that. It's like almost a majestic beard. He was a striking good looks, if I may say. I remember thinking that too about that guy. Anyway, that guy seems to be totally right. What do you know? And so just something to keep in mind when you're going to Thanksgiving. And if somebody serves you milk, I don't know why you'd be drinking milk in the first place if you're over the age of 7, but certainly not at Thanksgiving. But if somebody does serve you milk, you might want to ask, is this regular milk or is this the bird flu kind? You might want to just ask that just to be safe. Attention parents, I've got an early holiday gift for you. We've all been there. 1 minute, your kiddo is bouncing off the walls. An hour later, they're super sick. You can't help but feel helpless. You can turn your plans upside down, especially if you're on vacation. After thousands of customer requests, the wellness company has just launched the Kids Medical Emergency Kit. You no longer have to deal with emergency illnesses and panic mode. Now you can have 6 critical medications at your fingertips to treat 20-plus illnesses for issues like strep throat, ear infections, lice, respiratory illnesses. You can avoid urgent care and hospitals at the same time. The Kids Emergency Kit has been hand-selected by the wellness company's medical board and includes chewable amoxicillin, dissolvable ivermectin, and optional EpiPen, and also more. This includes a detailed guidebook guiding you step-by-step in emergencies. Ordering this kit is simple. Only parents can order for their children. Fill out an intake form, and you'll get a verification call for consent. Then it's delivered to your door. It's that simple. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis and avoid the late-night urgent care runs. Also, order your Kids Emergency Kit today. Remove panic from your life, and if 1 or 2 of the scripts run out, there's a replenishment option to restock only when you need. Go to urgentcarekit.com/Walsh. Use promo code Walsh to save $45 plus free shipping. That's urgentcarekit.com/Walsh. Promo code Walsh. These kits are only available in the USA. Our Daily Wire Plus Black Friday sale is live. Get 50% off new annual memberships right now. Normally, this is where I'd share a code, but not today. No code needed. Just head to dailywire.com/Black Friday and claim your new Daily Wire Plus membership for 50% off. With Daily Wire Plus, you get it all. Uncensored daily shows with limited ads, live breaking news you can trust, premium entertainment, reshaping culture. From the decade's #1 documentary, Am I Racist?, to exclusive series and hit movies, Daily Wire Plus offers it all and more. Your support makes this fight possible. Don't wait. Join the fight. Save 50% today. Go to dailywire.com/Black Friday. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. It's been a couple of weeks since the election, so it seems like a good time to check in on all those celebrities who said they'd flee the United States if Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris. That's a list that includes Barbara Streisand, who said that she wouldn't be able to, quote, live in this country if he becomes president. She said she'd probably move to England. Then there was Cher, who vowed all the way back in 2016 that she'd leave the planet if Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. She apparently decided on reflection that she would simply start presenting as an alien instead of joining them among the stars. But last year, Cher was back with another threat, quote, I almost got an ulcer the last time. If he gets in, who knows? This time I'll leave the country, she said. Not to be outdone, Sharon Stone echoed that same rhetoric. She said that if Trump won, she'd move overseas. Quote, I'm certainly considering a house in Italy, she said. Now, so far, as best I can tell, none of these celebrities have actually done what they said they were going to do. They haven't fled the U.S. in the wake of Kamala Harris's crushing defeat. The same is true for all the celebrities who claim that Donald Trump would ensure that America never holds a democratic election in the future. We can only conclude that they're either fine with fascism or they never meant anything they said. Though to be fair, it's also possible that all those celebrities I mentioned, at the top did leave the country. There's no way for us to know. It's been like 35 years since any of them have been remotely relevant anyway. But in any case, to her credit, Sharon Stone has at least been spending some time in Italy in the wake of the election. So that's something. And the other day, in fact, Sharon Stone spoke at the Torino Film Festival. After receiving some kind of award, she proceeded to explain the real reason that Kamala Harris lost to Trump. Now, according to Sharon Stone, Americans are ignorant and stupid. Unlike Sharon Stone, who, believe it or not, has a reported IQ of 154. That's an actual statistic that Sharon Stone apparently told CBS News at some point. And if CBS News is taking self-reported IQ data and putting it into news articles, then I would like to announce to CBS News that I have an IQ of 207. Which is a claim that is at least as plausible as Sharon Stone's 154. So with that stratospheric self-professed IQ in mind, here is what Sharon Stone says when she's explaining what all you dumb people need to do in order to be more like Sharon Stone.
My country is in its adolescence. Adolescence is very arrogant. Adolescence thinks it knows everything. Adolescence is naive and ignorant and arrogant, and we are in our ignorant, arrogant adolescence. We haven't seen this before in our country. So Americans who don't travel, who 80% don't have a passport, who are uneducated, are in their extraordinary naivete. Now, we can't just say that women should help women, because that's the only way we have survived so far. We must say that good men must help good men, and those good men must be very aware that a lot of your friends are not good men. And you can't continue to pretend that your friends are good men when they are not good men. And you must be very clear-minded and understand that your friends who are not good men are dangerous, violent men. And you have to keep them away from your daughters, your wives, and your girlfriends. Because this is a time when we can no longer look away when bad men are bad.
Bad men are bad, Sharon Stone says, and then the audience erupts in applause. You can't beat it. Armed with her 154 IQ, somehow Sharon Stone is only capable of speaking like a toddler, and the film circuit in Torino just eats it up, of course. Apparently, these people buy her claim that until this very point in history, men have not judged the character traits of other men. Just not something that's ever happened. Women have been doing that, and that's how we have a functioning civilization, according to Sharon Stone. But men have never stopped and used their brains to decide who their friends should be. Men just move in packs, I guess. They go out at dusk and hunt animals and collect firewood without any regard for whether their packmates are good men. And now, at last, Sharon Stone tells us that change is necessary. Men have to get real serious about disowning all of their friends who don't vote the way Sharon Stone wants because, they're dangerous and evil and so on. If your buddy voted for Trump, then you have no choice. You have to keep him away from your family as if he's a rabid raccoon. If you voted for Trump, then I guess you have to also stay away from other people. may sound a little harsh, but according to 154 IQ Sharon Stone, it's a necessary sacrifice that you'll just have to make. And to prove her point, 154 IQ Sharon Stone dropped the single most obviously fake statistic that's ever been dropped in the history of fake statistics. This is one you don't even need to Google to verify that it's completely and totally made up. Watch.
Watching a comedian the other night, and he said, I asked a woman to dinner, and she said yes. And it was such a brave thing for her to do. Because the only real thing, the number one killer of women in the world today is men. For men, the number one killer is heart disease. The number one killer for women is men. It is very important to remember that, men. Very important to remember that. Thank you.
Well, we're definitely going to remember that statistic. It's going to be hard to forget it because it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. She's saying that the leading cause of death among women isn't natural causes. It's not heart disease or cancer or anything. It's men who are killing women. Now, in order to believe that that's true, you'd have to be basically completely and totally innumerate. There's just no way around it. You need to have no common sense or capacity to form, to engage in like basic logic. You'd also have to have no understanding of crime statistics, which show that men overwhelmingly tend to kill other men, as you'd expect. But just in case you needed verification, here's the CDC, for example. Quote, heart disease is the leading cause of death for women in the United States, killing 310,661 women in 2021, or about 1 in every 5 female deaths. In other words, the top cause of death among women is the same as the top cause among men. And by the way, it's not like men are the number 2 cause of death among women. The number 2 cause of death is cancer. Then there's accidents, respiratory disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, kidney disease, liver disease, and on and on. Murder by men doesn't even make the list. But I'm picking on poor Sharon Stone a bit too much here. Elsewhere at the same festival, Alec Baldwin spoke to reporters, and while he was there, just like Sharon Stone, he also called Americans stupid and ignorant. But then he went further. He explained that an information gap is the reason Kamala Harris lost the election, and then he announced a solution. This is somehow an even more incredible clip than the one we just played. Watch.
In my country, without going into significant detail, half the people in the country are happy, and half the people in the country are very unhappy. It's a very difficult time in the United States, but there's a hole, there's a vacuum. There is a gap, if you will, in information for Americans. Americans are very uninformed about reality, what's really going on. With climate change, Ukraine, Israel, you name it, all the biggest topics in the world, Americans have an appetite for a little bit of information. That vacuum is filled by the film industry. Not just the independent film industry, not just the documentary film industry, which are very important around the world, but by narrative films as well, where the filmmakers and the buyers, the studios and the networks and the streamers are willing to go that way. They're willing to try to make films that are not only entertaining, but informative as well. So I think right now is probably one of the most significant times in our history, since film began, since the film experience began. It became an art form, it became a business, a huge business. Now is probably one of the most important times in our history for us to make films that will teach people about what reality is around the world.
I'm normally a big advocate of the Second Amendment, but I do hope that there were metal detectors at this event to make sure, Alec Baldwin wasn't armed, because we know how that can turn out. Yes, the film industry is going to educate all these dumb Americans who don't respect the political insights of Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin says people are going to flock to movie theaters and Netflix to figure out who they should vote for. They're going to watch Yellowstone, and then they're going to decide that actually it makes sense to castrate children and open the border and all the rest of it. That's the idea. Who needs social media platforms like X or any news sources whatsoever when you have the film industry? Now, all these celebrity tantrums remind me of that infamous quote from Michelle Obama from February of 2008. We all probably remember this. She said she was finally proud of her country for the first time in her life when Barack Obama's presidential bid started to take off. Watch.
For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change.
This really sums up how these leftist elites see this country and our people. We are good when we do what they want and bad when we don't. I mean, it's really as simple as that. For all the moralizing and lecturing these people do, and for all their insistence that Americans are uneducated because they don't travel to Italy to collect useless awards, that's what it comes down to. They demand compliance. And when they don't get it, they feel compelled to complain to the point that they make complete and utter fools of themselves. That's what just happened in Italy. And that is why Sharon Stone, Alec Baldwin, and all the other vapid celebrities who are going overseas to scold Americans for supporting Donald Trump are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today and this week as we take a break for Thanksgiving. Have a blessed Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next week. Godspeed.
John Bickley here, Daily Wire editor-in-chief. Wake up every morning with our show, Morning Wire, where we bring you all the news that you need to know in 15 minutes or less. Join me and my co-host Georgia Howe for daily coverage of all the biggest stories on Morning Wire.
Remember when Christmas was Christmas and razors were just razors? While the progressive Grinches running woke corporations are tearing down traditions, Jeremy's Razors is here to help you save them. Black Friday deals are now live. Save 30%. Stocking stuffers under $15. Shave, hair, and body bundles under $50. Plus, get free shipping on qualifying orders. Keep Christmas woke free. Order now at jeremysrazors.com. See website for details.